Hey, is this on? No? Can you hear me? Hi, good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? Louder. Joseph. Joseph, my friend behind the curtain. All right, how's that? Is that getting better? Because I think we have to stand back from the microphone, otherwise we're hunched over. So we've got an exciting program. So we're going to go ahead and get started. We're running a few minutes behind because we wanted to give folks the opportunity to look through the documents and chit chat, and everyone seems to be having a good time. My name is Scott Kraling. I am the Doñana County Clerk. The County Clerk's office is the office that's responsible for today. Our dedicated staff are the folks that have been digging through the records of the history of Doñana County and came across this report. And so on behalf of them and myself, thank you all very much for being here. Before I move on, we found an earring on the floor. So if this looks familiar to you, I'm going to put it over here on the table. Don't come get it now. We won't embarrass you. But it's a cool earring. It looks like it's somebody's, and it's probably important. So it's up here for you after the program is over. We have many elected officials in the audience with us today, local elected officials. I want to thank them all for being here. I don't want to try to do a list because I'll miss somebody, and I hate to make those mistakes. So if you're an elected official, would you mind would you mind standing up and giving everybody a wave? And well, thank you for being here. Thank you. We obviously appreciate all of you being here today, but we have a very special guest. We have a living relative of Pat Garrett in the room with us today. Susanna Garrett traveled from Santa Fe to be here with us. Susanna, thank you very much. I don't know if you want to stand up and wave or being here. Susanna is the daughter of the late Jarvis Powers Garrett, who was 3 years old when his father was shot by Jesse Wayne Brazell. So we're very excited when we found out that a living relative would be here to celebrate this great occasion. We're very excited that you made it today. We called today's event Holding History in Our Hands because that's what we do in the clerk's office every day. Whether we are dealing with the documents that are coming in today that need to be recorded, or we're dealing with the old historic collections. We are literally holding history in our hands. The work that we do in our office is tied to the work of so many of our other partners in this room when it comes to preserving the facts of what our history looks like, of what today looks like, so that 200 years from now, someone can look back and say, that's what was happening in Doñana County at that time. Our office and our staff, our dedicated staff, play a significant part in our culture and preserving history for generations. Before I get into some speakers, I want to say that while today we are celebrating the discovery of Pat Garrett's coroner's report, we also want to take some time to celebrate our history and acknowledge a native New Mexican and longtime resident of Doñana County, Cal Traylor. Cal Traylor passed away on June 11th, 2015, but he was a very committed member of our community, dedicated to the history of the Southwest, Pat Garrett in particular, but he was also very involved in our community. He was very giving. He was a part of the Friends of Pat Garrett. I think we have some representatives from the Friends of Pat Garrett. Hey, guys. He was a past chair of the Doñana County Historical Society. He was an integral part of getting Pat Garrett's hearse into the Lawman Museum that's down just in the next building over at the Sheriff's Department. So if anybody hasn't ever been through that museum, I encourage you to just take 50 yards down the sidewalk over here and check out that museum. Cal Traylor was an integral part of getting a very historic piece of our history into that museum, and he donated resources to get it done. A very generous man. He gave much to his community. In fact, when he passed away, he donated his savings to helping veterans. And so while we wish he was here because he would visit our office and he would visit our vault, and he always knew that we had something in our vault that was exciting. He's not, but we thought it would be worth our time to dedicate this event in his honor because of his commitment to our community and the work that he did in preserving it. So, in case you didn't know, today is actually officially Pat Garrett Day in Doña Ana County. On Tuesday, the Board of County Commissioners passed a proclamation declaring today Pat Garrett Day as a part of our celebration to contribute their voice of support for what we're doing. And we celebrate Pat Garrett not only as an infamous lawman who killed Billy the Kid, but as a public servant and a resident of our community. Today we're celebrating his legacy and how the Wild West fits into the larger American culture and society. But we hope that we are contributing to keeping his legacy alive and preserving this crucial piece of history for generations to come. So with that said, I'd like to introduce the Doña Ana County Manager, Chuck McMahon. Chuck is going to be reading the proclamation that the Board of County Commissioners passed and maybe say hello as well. Chuck.
Good morning. Thank you all for coming and spending some time with us. And on behalf of the county, welcome to our building. We hope you come back many more times. It's a very exciting day, not only for the county, but for, of course, the clerk's office. It's a piece of living history, as Scott mentioned, and we really are very, very pleased that this was found, and we can continue to archive and preserve our history of this community. So without further ado, this is the proclamation the commissioners passed this past Tuesday. Whereas the Doña Ana County Board of Commissioners is pleased to recognize legendary Doña Ana County Sheriff Patrick Floyd Jarvis Garrett, also known as Pat Garrett, and his legacy to the history of our county. And whereas we recognize the role of the county clerk's office in our community to record and file public records that are a significant part of preserving the history of residents of Doña Ana County. And whereas preserving these public records and historical documents enrich our culture and heritage of people in our county, including prominent historical figures such as the famous lawman, Pat Garrett. And whereas we celebrate the discovery of Pat Garrett's coroner's report, a significant historical document that now becomes a valuable piece of the mystery surrounding Pat Garrett's death. And whereas this historical document is part of a larger county clerk's preservation project that we believe contains other rich and valuable documents relevant to the history and people of Doña Ana County. And whereas we support the clerk's office in celebrating and sharing the discovery with residents of our county and historians, many who have spent their life's work preserving the legacy of Pat Garrett and the Wild West for generations to enjoy as part of our American culture. And whereas it is appropriate to remember those who served our community with honor and pride, like Sheriff Pat Garrett, as public servants dedicated to the well-being of the people preserving the common good. And whereas it is the distinct pleasure and privilege of the Doña Ana County Board of Commissioners to bestow proclamations, and all residents of Doña Ana County are represented by the Doña Ana County Board of Commissioners, and therefore speak with a united voice through the actions and deeds of this board. Now, therefore, the Doña Ana County Board of Commissioners does hereby proclaim June 16th as Pat Garrett Day in honor of the infamous lawman and dedicated servant to the public, and encourages all residents, government agencies, public and private institutions, businesses, schools, community college, and universities to recognize the role of the county clerk's office in our community to preserve and protect public records that enrich the history and culture of our county and become a valuable part of our heritage for generations. Proudly proclaim this 13th day of June 2017. Thank you.
Okay, hi, me again. It's my honor to, we have a program. I know we ran out of some of them, so maybe not all of you have a copy of it, but we've got a few speakers today. And the first up is the state historian, Rick Hendricks. Rick is a resident of Las Cruces. He's written and collaborated on numerous books and articles on the history of the American Southwest and Mexico. His writings have garnered numerous awards. At New Mexico State University, Rick taught courses in colonial Latin America and Mexican history. He's the past president of the Historical Society of New Mexico. It could go on and on and on. Rick, we're very proud to have you here today. Thank you so much for being here. So here is Rick.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here. It's even more of a pleasure to see this many people gathered to see a bunch of moldy historical documents. I'm going to speak very briefly. I said I would limit my comments to 10 minutes. I have one little note card, so nobody should have to fall asleep. A project of the nature that's being undertaken by the clerk's office here takes a lot of time. I was contacted in the winter of 2014. I came home and spent some time over the last few years. I spent a couple of weeks looking at some of these documents, help sorting them out some. And of course, the staff is really ramped up and excited now that they've located the Garrett document. These documents that you see over here on the table are all nice and neat. A lot of the documents that they're working with present a lot of challenges. When I was looking at some of the documents, you'd see a page here and a page there, and they were all scattered, so they're not all neat. There's some challenges that they're facing. A project like this also requires resources, financial resources and human resources. The New Mexico Historical Records Advisory Board, which operates out of the Office of the State Historian, regrants funds for archival preservation projects. I'm happy to say that we have been able to make a very small grant to the county in furtherance of their project. We know that we have federal funds to re-grant for next year, and I'm hoping that maybe the county will come back and ask for more and we'll be able to provide a little more. I would mention that those federal funds are very much at risk. All the current budget proposals are going to really diminish funding for historical projects. So you might, if you believe in this kind of research, you might consider contacting your representative and ask them not to do that. Anyone who wants to do serious research in the history of New Mexico will find that you have to work at the county level and at the state level for a variety of reasons. A lot of county documents are not gathered into the state archive. Some of it has to do with the fact that lawyers need access to deed records to do title changes, but there are also lots of other records that for whatever reason are here. So if you're going to do serious research, you have to do research in our various counties and also in Santa Fe in the state archives. And when people contact me about how to formulate a research project, I always let them know that they're going to need to go to the counties. Well, one of the things that I can tell you is that not all the counties are as dedicated or well organized in terms of their historical records as we have here in Doña Ana. The facility that they have here already is close to state of the art. It's the shelving that they have for the archival records is more advanced than what we have at the state archives. And they also have an incredibly dedicated staff working on it. Just to give you an idea, I mean, most of you are here because you have an interest in Pat Garrett or maybe Billy the Kid or both. Among the records that are in the collection that is being processed now are records that pertain to Arizona when it was part of New Mexico. You'll remember that until 1863, when President Lincoln divided it, Arizona and New Mexico was one state. So a lot of the records, especially probate records that have to do with prominent individuals who died in what is now Arizona, particularly southern Arizona, those records are here, and I think those are uniquely here. They don't have copies of those records over there. Probate records, to my mind, are the grist of social history. It's where you can find out where children went to college when their, say, the father died and the mother was taking care of him. And many of you probably don't know that certainly in the late 19th century and early 20th century, when the father died, the mother didn't automatically become the guardian of the children. There was a process by which guardians were named. And during that process, arrangements were often made for children to go to college or for children to be placed as what looks to me very close to being indentured servants with other people because the mom couldn't afford to take them. So all of those kind of records are in the material that is being processed. Probate records is where we find Fabian Garcia, the great agriculturalist at the university. It's where we find the record of him donating the money that made it possible for Garcia Annex to be built at the university. So there's lots and lots of information related to social history in those kinds of records. There's also a lot of information about elections. Elections are very much in the news, and in the collection, when I was looking at the documents, you see how political parties are formed, how ballots are constructed, and who's elected to be a representative of a state party. If you're interested in the history of the Socialist Party in New Mexico, which most people don't even know we ever had, there's a lot of information about that in some of these records as well. Infrastructure projects, road construction, who owned the road, the sort of the breeding ground of orange barrels. A lot of information about that. I could go on and on. I could talk forever about this record collection, but I'm not going to. But I am going to say one thing. We had a really fun event last night at the Fountain Theater, and I saw in the face of the clerk something that was very close to joy and certainly enthusiasm for history. And I know from my communications with the staff that they share that enthusiasm for history, and so do all of you. Thank you for your time, and thanks for coming.
All right, me again. You're going to get used to seeing me. Before we move on, it's customary for the cool thing. I'm looking out at this group and I'm seeing generations, and it's exciting to see generations interested in the history of Doña Ana County. So on behalf of generations, we're just going to do a quick little selfie. So everybody wave. Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Up next is Angelica Valenzuela. Angelica is the supervisor of our recording and filing division in our office. And I would love to take credit for projects like this, but it's really, I think, the vision of Angelica that's gotten us here today. When she became the supervisor, we started thinking through bigger than just the day-to-day work that was coming into our office. And we do have a significant amount of work that's coming in on a daily basis: marriage licenses, real estate purchases, a wide variety of documents, and she's going to talk a little bit about that. But she has been the effort behind expanding our vision from more than just what we're processing on a day-to-day basis and getting into an understanding, having a bigger and deeper understanding for the history of our community, the role that we play in preserving the history of Doña Ana County. And so I didn't even read whatever I wrote for her, so I won't. I'll just say, Angelica, come on up here and it's your turn.
Thank you all for being here. I'm very excited. I wasn't expecting such a great turnout, so thank you. The clerk's office, the whole office, worked very, very hard to try to plan an event that makes sure that the history of Doña Ana County and this particular document shine and give the recognition that it deserves. So thank you for being a part of that. As you heard from Dr. Hendricks, our office records thousands of different documents, and different versions of recorders have existed throughout history. And that's what I'm going to talk about for a little while right now. The clerk, along with the tax collector, is the oldest public office. The position can be traced back to biblical times and before. Ancient Greece had a city secretary. Egypt had scribes, and the early keepers of the archives were often called remembrances. Before writing came into use, their memory was the public record. That wouldn't work too good today, not with my memory, and maybe not with Scott's memory. Sorry to call you out, boss, but today the record keeper for the community is the clerk. The clerk's office records history every day. We are the custodian of a community's history. Staff often say that the information recorded today is tomorrow's history. The records in the clerk's office tell the truth about our culture and the needs of the community, both past and present. Some of the earliest records were made with reeds cut at an angle to make wedge-shaped marks on clay. These records look like accounts or lists of property, cattle, sheep, and wheat. They seem to be details of who owned what. This is the same type of information we record today and have recorded for years. The public can file anything in the clerk's office records. Filing a document in the clerk's office makes the information on the document public record. All documents recorded in the clerk's office are permanent records and can be accessed at any time by anyone, no matter how many years have passed. Some clerk's records include licenses, county commission records, election records, and real estate records, maps, mining claims, newspapers, and probate records. And as Dr. Hendricks mentioned, probate records tell a unique part of a person's estate or a person's family. It gives lots of different information that you might not expect to find. For instance, on August 1st, 1861, Colonel John Robert Baylor proclaimed the creation of the Confederate Territory of Arizona. So from 1861 until Abraham Lincoln created the Territory of Arizona out of the Territory of New Mexico in 1863, Doña County had two identities. From the Union's point of view, it remained a territory in the United States and stretched to the California border. From the point of view of the Confederacy, New Mexico south of the 34th parallel formed part of the Confederacy of Arizona with its capital in Mesilla. The estate of Thomas J. Maston, Doña County probate records. Thomas Maston was a native of Mississippi. He relocated to California in 1857. Within 3 years, Maston was living in Pinos Altos, practicing law and operating a mercantile business. In December 1860, Maston discovered a quartz lode, which he called the Pacific Mine. The following year, he became a partner in a ranching operation. By the early 1860s, Maston was one of the most prominent and well-respected men in Doña County. The Mesilla Times bestowed on him the honorary title colonel in 1861, rather remarkable recognition for a man of 23. In March of that year, as a delegate from Pinos Altos at a convention of county residents, Maston voted to secede from the Union and applied to the Confederacy for admission as a territory. In July 1861, Maston formed the so-called Arizona Guards. The guards charged with protecting the Pinos Altos mining district from the Apaches was mustered into the Confederacy Army in August 1861 and headquartered at Fort Fillmore. The guards under Maston's command carried out numerous forays against the Apaches. Then, on September 27, 1861, Maston and a detachment of 15 men faced 300 Apache warriors under the command of Cochise and Mangas Coloradas. The vastly outnumbered guards successfully repulsed the Apaches and thereby saved Pinos Altos, both the town and the mines. But Maston died as a result of wounds received in battle. As a result, Doña County lost a promising citizen who was described by one contemporary as young, bold, chivalrous, and talented. What the records reveal. Thomas J. Maston's brother, Virgil Maston, applied for administrator of the estate of Thomas J. Maston. This document reveals that Thomas J. Maston died in battle with Apache Indians on the 27th day of October, 1861. Several documents depict aspects of Maston's estate and provide information about a typical mercantile in the southern New Mexico at the middle of the 19th century. Among the assets of Maston's estate were quartermaster's vouchers, accounts due, payments due, interests in mining companies, half interest in a ranch, and livestock. Also listed among the assets of Maston's estates are items that give an indication of goods that could be purchased at his mercantile. Another document lists items provided to Maston by William B. Rahman, which were also stocked in Maston's store. I'd like to thank right now Dr. Rick Hendricks, our state historian, for giving me the information on Thomas Maston. I have been very lucky and honored to know him. He has been a great partner for me. I've learned a lot so far from him, and I appreciate his support and his continued support in our efforts to preserve this information and make it easier for researchers everywhere to research our history, genealogy, our family members. A lot of us have strong roots in the community that date back from the beginning. So thank you for that. I've also had the privilege of meeting Dennis Daly, who is the department head of the NMSU Library Archives and Special Collections Department. And I met him and his staff, and they were nice enough. I believe a representative of the department is here today. Where are you? Right over there. I was very privileged to get a tour of the archives. Needless to say, their millions and millions of records do not compare to our little vault that we have in our office. But it's important to recognize that we have archives all over the state level, the universities, the museums, the local archives, and even the county clerk's office and other government entities. So Teddy Moreno, a staff from the Archives and Special Collections, was kind enough to send me a few photographs of a collection that she received, that they received not too long ago. They were letters from William Lyon to Corey Bowman. One letter in particular that I had interest in that they showed me was dated February 28th, 1882, which is just a few months after Pat Garrett killed Billy the Kid. And I'd like to read a little paragraph of that letter so you can see why I was interested in it. My dear Corey, the letters, on the letter it says Socorro, New Mexico, February 28, 1882. My dear Corey, I had just settled down into my first comfortable sleep when we reached Socorro at 2 a.m. this morning. The omnibus drove us up to the Jewett House, where they gave me a room with a very tall, handsome, good-natured-looking fellow who introduced himself to me as Pat Garrett. He had heard of me, and I of him, but we were both too sleepy to indulge in lengthened reminiscence of Lincoln County. I thought, whoa, what a coincidence. They just got these letters donated, and we had just recently, a few months earlier, found the coroner's report for Pat Garrett. And we've had a lot of those types of coincidences lately. It almost feels like this was all meant to be at this time. But these letters, this particular letter also talked about that he had been going around looking at homes for them. Talks about the prices of the homes. And so, it depicts interesting information about the area at that time. And again, they were donated a whole collection of these letters. That's all I have to say for today. Thank you again for being here. I think that it is, again, important to recognize that we should be developing partnerships. Dennis Daly also introduced me to an organization called BRAG, which is the Border Regional Archives Group. Anyone from BRAG, please raise your hand. The purpose of the group is to establish a network of professionals who work with archives, records, and special collections in libraries, museums, historical societies, governmental offices, private institutions, in order to share information of mutual interest and benefit foster greater awareness of archives among the public, build greater awareness among ourselves of the historical resources of our unique region. So if anyone from Bragg, could you raise your hand if you're here, if you're part of that group? So if you want any additional information, I can get you in contact with Dennis Daly, or you can speak to, I believe you're from the El Paso Historical Society. Yes, so thank you for being here. And again, thank you all. I think we should probably get into why we're all here in the first place. And that's revealing the document. Again, by building partnerships, we might have the opportunity to solve several mysteries. Speaking of mysteries, go ahead, Scott, and we'll get into this.
Oh no, my notes got mixed up with her notes. Yay, found them. Hi again. You know, I don't think I mentioned this. It's what I had written down about Angelica that I didn't read. But she's actually the person that discovered the coroner's report. And so we have a staff. Yeah, it's exciting. We discovered the report as a grant team from our office was kind of sorting through this collection of documents that really hadn't ever really been touched in our office. And so they were unfolding documents and putting them in folders and kind of identifying things. They weren't reading each and every document as they were unfolding. And it just so happened that one of the documents that they did open up and read was the Pat Garrett Coroner's Report. And because of communication with people in the community, we kind of knew, well, one, you see Pat Garrett, you're like, wow, hey, we know that name. But we'd also received requests for it in the past. And so I won't ruin the story because Angelica tells it way better than I do. So if you're interested in hearing the story of how she just randomly came across this document, talk to her. It's fascinating. And one of the reasons that we knew that it was an important document was because of a gentleman, Dr. Bob Stahl, who's a historian and professor emeritus from Arizona State University. We're honored to have Dr. Stahl with us today, as well as his wife Nancy and his brother who traveled from Singapore to be here in the Southwest. Dr. Stahl is a professor emeritus from Arizona State University in Tempe. He's a private consultant, researcher, historian, speaker, and author. He's an integral part of supporting us in getting the grant that we've received to start working with these documents and preserve them and give them access to the public. And so we look forward to continuing our partnership with him as we move forward to preserve the collection, the bigger collection of historical documents. And Bob, I don't know where you are out there, but I think you got a couple of things that you'd like to say. And so Dr. Bob Stahl.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, honored guests, historians, citizens of Doña County, and members of the Doña County County Commissioner, as well as the County Courthouse staff. I am honored to be here this morning for this very important event in the history of the official courthouse records of Doña County. Having some semblance of Pat Garrett, the man, in the context of 1908, Las Cruces, I am of the opinion that if Pat Garrett himself were here today, he might have opened with a welcome comment something like this. Greetings, honorable men, and in some instances, less than honorable men and women of Doña County, townsfolks, rascals, scoundrels, courthouse officials, my few friends, and my many enemies, the latter of which I am sure are very glad I am at last dead. I congratulate the staff of the county clerk's office for what it has done to date in search through the old doc records and to move forward in recording, filing, and describing the records found. I am sure that there is a gold mine of documents that will be of interest to historians, history buffs, genealogists, and people searching family histories. What you have done so far is just the tip of the iceberg of unveiling important documents of this county's history. I wish you well in getting the funding needed to complete your many tasks. Today we are privileged at long last, after 108 years, to view this particular coroner's jury report, which reads, "We, the undersigned Justice of the Peace and coroner's jury, have attended the investigation of the body of Pat Garrett, who was reported dead within the limits of precinct number 20, County of Doña County, and Territory of New Mexico, on about 5 miles northeast of the town of Las Cruces, and find that the deceased came to his death by gunshots, wounded inflicted by Wayne Brazel." Let us take a moment and consider this particular jury's activities and its written report in the context of the era. In 1908, New Mexico was still in its pre-statehood days. The coroner's juries were assembled by the instance of a violent death or a death under unusual circumstances. The elected county coroner or the justice of the peace of a particular precinct where a dead body was located were the only ones who could legally assemble a coroner's jury, made up of an all-male 6-member jury consisting of men of that precinct. A primary task of the jury was to identify the body. The justice of the peace or coroner were not members of the coroner's jury, but were present to guide the jury through its investigations and decision-making activities, and to make sure that the foreman or the president of the jury created a final report, and to make sure that the jurors signed that particular report. Typically, the jury reached and recorded its verdict as to their view of the category of death of the particular individual. The justice of the peace or coroner then was responsible for signing the official document and then making sure that it was delivered to the county courthouse. In this particular case, we know it was done. Now, when you look at this particular document, you will find that it's very sparse in detail. And one of the reasons for this is that during the territorial days, there were no specific detailed guidelines to direct the jury during its investigation or to dictate the kind of decision it had to make. For instance, there were no guidelines as to whether or not they needed to interview eyewitnesses to the killing, or even to interview the murderer himself or herself. There were no guidelines as to whether or not they needed to report on the disposition or the position of the body, or guidelines to record the manner of death. There simply were just no guidelines to guide the jury as to what to do. There was no official form or format for the report. They wrote what they wanted to write, and they signed it at the end. So the decisions as to what for them to do and what decisions needed to be recorded were primarily up to the jury's president or foreman, with suggestions by the coroner or the justice of the peace. At the beginning of the territory of New Mexico in 1850, the Constitution required all official documents to be written in Spanish. However, during the latter part of the 1880s and the early 1900s, official documents began to be written in English. And when you look at this particular document, you will see that it is written in English, so it is followed that later pattern, as opposed to being in Spanish, which was the language to which the coroner jury report for the Billy the Kid murder was completed. What is interesting but not uncommon for the time is that this particular report for Pat Garrett was not very detailed or specific. For instance, they did not report details on the specific place where they found his body, such as alongside the road to Garrett's Bear Canyon Ranch, about 5 miles northeast of Las Cruces. They did not report the approximate time of death. They did not record they found Garrett having been shot in the back of the head and a bullet exiting the left side of his forehead. They did not record that he was shot a second time. They did not record whether the bullet wounds were from the same gun or type of gun. They did not report that Pat Garrett's pants were lowered down and there was urine on his pants, indicating that he apparently was killed while he was urinating. They did not record the position of the body as whether he was lying on his back with arms outstretched. They did not record that Pat Garrett was unarmed. They did not record that Wayne Brazel was the self-confessed killer of Pat Garrett. They did not report whether they interviewed Garrett's killer, and if so, what they told him. Okay. They did not record whether or not they interviewed Carl Adamson of Roswell, the only other known eyewitness to the murder. They failed to record a verdict, such as whether or not at the time of their meeting they considered the shooting death of being an instance of first or second degree murder, justifiable homicide, self-defense, an accident, a suicide, or some other type of homicide. Such information would leave us with more information as to exactly what they saw at that site and what they heard at the murder site and what their opinion was of the nature of the killing. Any of these would have been made at this particular jury's report far more interesting and informative. Okay. What might surprise many of you is that even with this particular coroner's jury report, abundant newspaper articles, and a later murder trial, Wayne Brazel, who was the self-confessed murderer, was not convicted of murder, and he was acquitted. Pat Garrett's death today is one of the most famous unsolved murder cases in the history of New Mexico. In closing, I just want to, as a historian, I wanted just to point out that when you read a document, such as like a coroner's jury report that you'll read in just a few minutes, it's important that you have some kind of a context of what it was like back in 1908 so that you understand what people back then would have been thinking, what was operating at the time in terms of their mindset and the context of the situation. I hope that with my words I've helped you in understanding this particular document and what you will read and what you will not read in this particular document as it is worded. I again thank you for the invitation for speaking, and thank you for being here. And now let's unveil the document.
Okay, all right. Now, the moment of truth. I'd like to ask any elected official that's here with us in the audience to come on forward and help us out. I'd also like to ask employees from our office, the county clerk's office, come on up here, guys. We got staff that have been kind of coming in and out, enjoying the event with us, but we have our day-to-day work that's going on back there. And so those of you in the office, you're here in our hearts. So I'd like to have elected officials, staff from our office, to help us out with this. We're very excited. So, Angelica, why don't you help me out? Why don't you grab the photo person. Come around over here, guys. Everybody come around. Everybody group up around. Let's take a big photo. Come on in, Madam Mayor. Are we missing anyone? Employees, staff? Was that? All right, all you, Angelica. Hold on. You'll get a chance to come on up here and take a look here. All right, thanks for coming up and joining us. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, you're fine.
Thank you. I just have a couple of closing remarks. Thanks everybody for coming up and joining us. The first thing that I want to say is that as a part of our celebration today, we put together a framed copy of the report along with a picture of Cal Traylor, the gentleman that I talked about at the beginning, that we'd like to contribute to the sheriff's office in their Museum of Lawmen in Doña Ana County. So we've got this nice framed copy of the report, a picture of Cal Traylor, who spent his life dedicated to the community. So we'll be giving that to the museum over there. Again, if you haven't seen that museum, go on down there and check it out. I think it's exciting. And then so the final thing that I'd like to say. Bear with me for a few moments before you get the chance to come on up here and take a look at this. I mean, please look at our other documents, obviously. This discovery is a part of a larger preservation project in our office. We are, as Dr. Stahl said, we're sitting on a gold mine of historical documents. A collection ranging from 1854 to 1963 of probate records, coroner's reports, voting ballots, patents, you name it, tons of public documents. And it's our responsibility to preserve these documents for the history, to preserve the history of Doña Ana County and to provide public access to them. And so that's a part of what this is for us, is we're trying to do the best that we can to make sure that we're accurately preserving them, that we're recording the important information that has not come out of them yet. And so we do need partnerships. So it's important for us to have reached out to so many of different organizations. Thank you all for being here. We look forward to continuing our relationship so that we can make sure that we're doing everything that we should to do our part of this. We're not the experts. We're the experts on recording documents and making sure that they're accurate. We're becoming the experts on paper and learning how to make sure paper doesn't deteriorate. But there are so many historians and other academics and people in our community that can help us piece together all of these puzzles. And this is really only the beginning. While it is the beginning of our important preservations project that got us here, it's much more. It's the beginning because this discovery has unlocked many doors for us in our community. To honor Cal, we hope to petition the Wild West Association to bring a conference to Las Cruces in the future for our residents to enjoy. It's the beginning because these documents in our vault hold so many hopes for other families in our community. While we see Pat Garrett, we see the name, we think, wow, that's exciting. But the truth is, there are hundreds and hundreds of documents in our vault that are missing pieces to other stories for our community, of people that may or may not be well known. We've heard from different families and different people. Somebody asked me, are you getting a lot of calls from historians about this document? And the truth is, yes. But the truth is, we're getting more calls from people who are looking for the missing piece of the story of their family. And so we're excited. That brings even more joy to me, the idea that we're going to be helping so many families understand and find the missing pieces and the facts of the history of their family. I have one of the individuals that contacted us was a gentleman named Andrew Lee Bristol. He's a distant relative of Judge Warren Henry Bristol, the judge who sentenced Billy the Kid. And I'd like to read something that he wrote. He sent us a letter. He wanted to be here, but he needed to be out of state for the birth of his granddaughter. I'm sure everybody can relate and understand. Maybe not all of us, we're all generations. But he had to be out of town. But I wanted to read just a piece of what he wrote. I'm particularly interested in the newly found documents, which may bring light to the actual practices and performances of Judge Warren Henry Bristol. It is very important to me that the opening and recording of these newly found historical documents are processed as speedily as possible, as I would like to write a complete history of the Bristols in the United States before I die. I am in my early 70s. I am happy to provide any assistance to support this process by helping others with their desires of historical knowledge. I too will be able to obtain the information that I am seeking. And that's just an example, right? We talked about Cal Traylor and his commitment to Pat Garrett, and that we wish that he was here with us today. But there are so many other stories, and so we're excited, we're privileged, we're happy to be playing our role in this entire process. And when I say we, I'm not talking about me. I'm not just talking about Angelica, but the staff that was able to come up here and join us for this, the staff that's back in our office. We have a dedicated team in the clerk's office. It's amazing to work with them on a daily basis. They realize the importance not only of the work that we're doing on a day-to-day basis, recording everything accurately, but of but of the role that we play and the necessary commitment that we need to have to finding ways to address collections like these and make sure that we're doing our very best to preserve the history of Doña Ana County. And I'll just close by saying that I'm very, very proud to be working with such an amazing team. And thank you all so very much for coming out and joining us today. Please stay, enjoy the documents, talk to any of us, whatever you need. Thank you.
The Historical Society, or just a second?
They're all kind of getting up and walking around.
Let them.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to just take a second to acknowledge that the Doña Ana County Historical Society is here with us today. If you want to say a few words?
Well, what I wanted to mention was what the Historical Society is doing for Pat Garrett. We are taking this concept of holding history in your hands and putting it on the ground. There are two projects. One is to preserve the murder site in the Alameda Arroyo, and the other is to rename Motel Boulevard Pat Garrett Boulevard in honor of the sheriff's office and his work. So I just wanted to mention that if you're interested in the Historical Society, go online. It's Doña Ana County Historical Society, and you'll pick up information about what we do and how we do it. Thanks very much.
Thanks again, everybody. We have an earring up here. Don't forget about your earring. Thank you.